Hello, everyone. Welcome to Applichat Healthcare's next webinar on nurse recruitment. Today, we're really excited to be hosting a conversation about improving the candidate experience in healthcare talent acquisition. And we have two really interesting guests with us today who are the authors of a new book called Candidate Experience. And we're really looking forward to the conversation with them. We've been getting a great response from folks who really want to hear about this topic and hear from our guests today. My name is Patrick Thiele. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Applichat Healthcare. I'm your host today. We do host these webinars about every 2 weeks or so on generally specifically on nurse recruitment and healthcare recruitment and healthcare HR issues. And as I said, today we're going to be talking about the candidate experience. So maybe just briefly, first of all, I'll share with you that at Applichat Healthcare, we work with healthcare organizations across the US and Canada to bring our clients a larger audience of passive nurse candidates. And we do that by sourcing from non-job board channels to attract more candidates to our clients for permanent positions. We screen and engage with every applicant, and we try and help our clients to get more nurse hires quickly. So feel free to send me a message in the chat or on LinkedIn. I'll share my link to that in a moment if you're interested in hearing more about what we do at Applichat Healthcare and how we get good results for our clients. So as I said, today we are focusing on the candidate experience, and we're joined by Adela Schoolderman and Kevin Grossman, who recently launched their new book, Candidate Experience: How to Improve Talent Acquisition to Drive Business Performance. The book is written for HR professionals and all those responsible for talent acquisition. It's an evidence-based guide that explains what candidate experience is, why it matters, and how it impacts the bottom line. And today we're going to look at the candidate experience generally, but with a focus on the application, interview, and offer phases of the nurse or healthcare talent acquisition process. So that's the stages that our clients tell us they're interested in and sometimes run into some challenges, and we're interested in hearing some potential solutions for them through those stages. So Adela and Kevin will share insights from their book and from their many years of experience in healthcare talent, or in talent acquisition generally, and they will have an eye on streamlining and improving the processes to better engage and hire the talent you need. So maybe I'll start with a quick introduction. Kevin is the president of Talent Board. It's a research organization which provides industry benchmarks to show the business impact of effective candidate experience. He's based in Santa Cruz, California, and has more than 22 years of experience in human capital and talent acquisition strategy, and he's responsible for the Candidate Experience Awards worldwide. Adela is the Director of Learning Programs and Advisory Services at Talent Board. She's also based in Santa Cruz, California, and has over 12 years experience in talent acquisition, specializing in management consulting and technology recruiting within a variety of different industries. So welcome to you both. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you. And one thing is that I did change roles. I'm managing talent acquisition and technology at Edwards Life Sciences, and there's a wonderful person named Christy who is now at the Talent Board in my former role, who's amazing. So sorry we didn't update you on that little change, but
sure, my mistake.
Shout out to Christy. Oh, no worries. Yeah,
I read
no worries.
that from the book profile, and I should have checked with you. So thanks for clarifying that. That's great. That's helpful. So
life moves pretty fast, Patrick.
That's right. So just before we start, I did put my link in the chat to my sort of online business card. On there, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can join our Nurse Recruitment Secrets Facebook group. You can sign up to hear about our future webinars, and we also have a monthly newsletter. So that's on the screen and also in the chat. And I also want to make sure I remind people that we're really interested in hearing your questions, your comments about challenges with talent acquisition and the candidate experience for Adela and Kevin. So please post those in the chat anytime, and we'll see if we can get to those through the conversation today. There is the LinkedIn links as well for Kevin and Adela on the screen. And but you can also find them on the LinkedIn page for this event as well. And there's the book. So maybe let's start there. I mean, I did see your posts a few months ago when you launched the book, And boy,
Too.
it seemed like a pretty exciting time for you both when you were launching that, and I could feel the energy coming through. So maybe can you just tell us a little bit of the background? How did you end up writing a book about candidate experience?
You want me to start?
Go
You want
ahead.
to start?
Sure. Do it.
Well, so when I was working with the talent board, and we have a long history that goes back to, my goodness, Kevin, I think 2015.
Long time.
Um, I, it's candidate experience. Focusing on the candidate experience is what made me really love my job. I mean, honestly, before that, I wasn't so crazy about recruiting. I was trying to go more on the HR side of things. Working with the talent board is I found my passion and my spot. I love this. And the fast forward, the pandemic hit. Kevin and I were doing a lot of work together, audits, going deep into companies, helping them to improve candidate experience. And we started a learning program as well. So that was sort of the next step. And the first step of creating this learning program in conjunction with HR.com was to essentially put together just almost like a manuscript, a lot of notes, right? Just on all the phases. We use the phases of the candidate journey and just kind of dumped all of our knowledge and content in one spot. And at the end of it, I mean, kind of in jest, we're like, we should write a book. So we had to focus first, of course, on completing the learning program and getting that off the ground. But at the end of it, I mean, we had this momentum going. We went for it. Kevin, what am I? Fill us in. What am I missing?
No, you told the story right. I think what the idea was that we had just done all this work pulling together content from the 10 years of research at that time that we had been conducting in benchmark candidate experience research and recruiting and hiring. But the idea was it's not just about that, because we talk about and share that information every year across industries for companies big and small, but it was also, let's give it through the lens of the practitioner, where Adela comes from. I always kind of joke, I've been in the space for a long time in HR and recruiting, primarily the technology side. And my joke is I only play HR and recruiting on TV. Haha. But I love recruiting and hiring. I've been in the space for a long time. And it was actually through a startup when I first came into the space, again, over 23 years ago, where I was doing some ad hoc sourcing and recruiting on behalf of some of our customers that were leveraging our technology. And I'm like, oh, I like this a lot. I want to keep doing this. And so, but the idea was, let's put some of what we found in our research together, as well as what's it really like being that recruiting practitioner, and what we found in the research and what happens day to day, and what Adela's kind of mindset is, and what she's learned over the years of these are the things that, we know can drive better, improved recruiting and hiring, and ultimately a better candidate experience, which our research then shows impacts the business more positively, with candidates willing to try again, willing to refer, willing to buy stuff if it's a consumer-based organization, and all those things in between. So we took all that stuff that we had already had together for the learning program and put a pitch together for a publisher out of the UK called Kogan Page. And they said yes. You
already had the book somewhat written from
we had a lot. We actually had a lot of it, at least the outline for the book.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's great. Well, that's exciting. Good for you. I'm sure it's something that many people think about and be interested in doing, and maybe you're an example that it can be done even if it's not something that was your original goal. So that's great. Okay, well, we're going to get into some of the specific phases, as I said, the application phase, the screening interviewing page, and the offer stage. But before we get into those specific stages, you have an entire chapter in the book called "Why is the Candidate Experience Journey So Important?" So let's just start there. Let's talk about that generally. Why is the candidate experience journey so important?
Yeah.
You want me to jump in? Let me go first, and then you jump in?
I do.
So when I'll give it through the historical perspective of why Talent Board was even started. Now, I'm not one of the original founders, but I was involved early on after it was put together. It was a very volunteer-driven survey research group that the three co-founders, who had been a long time in recruiting consulting and in talent acquisition for much of their career to that point too, we keep talking about what's wrong with recruiting and hiring and candidate experience. Why don't we do some research, not only to focus more in on what's wrong, but also focus in on what's right, what's working. What are companies doing that improve positive sentiment, that improve a perception of fairness of going through the recruiting and hiring process? So that's how it all kind of started at the end of the day. And we ended up, from that point on, looking at the candidate experience, especially through the lens of, it's not just about this nice to have thing, because sometimes companies, healthcare organizations in particular, for maybe, non-administrative roles, not non-medical roles, maybe get a high volume, especially if they're large organizations and large, healthcare collectives, a lot of applications for certain roles.
Right.
But it wasn't just this nice to have thing. It was really, at the end of the day, think about the majority of people that apply for any given job at any given time aren't getting that job.
Right.
And the only thing candidates want at the end of the day is getting the job, but most won't. Right. So that aggregate number of people and their experiences that they've had, it basically will inform and impact whether or not they decide to ever try again with the company.
Okay.
To post a negative or a possibly negative Glassdoor review, or choose not to go solicit that company anymore, or be a brand champion, or refer somebody else to it. When, believe it or not, rejected candidates in our data that we find every year are willing to refer still if they have a positive and fair experience. We see it every year. So that's the whole point, and the whole theme of the book is the fact that it is about that ongoing business impact of the sheer volume of people that don't get hired.
Right.
Adela, you want to add to that?
Yeah, Patrick, did you have a question?
Yeah, no, I was going to say that you're touching on how it is the candidate experience is something positive for the candidate, but you're also leading into what we're going to talk about in a minute about how it impacts the business, right? The bottom line and improves the business overall. But I'll let Adela speak to the candidate experience first. Why it's
you just encapsulated it perfectly. It's everything. It's everything, right? I mean, I have a contact of mine. Her name is Alexa Smith. She's in Toronto, and she did employment branding for Anheuser-Busch and LinkedIn. And she made this great analogy that look at when you are buying a sneaker. I mean, think about the experience you get from Nike if you're buying a shoe from Nike, and then compare that to the job experience if you're applying for a job for any company, really. What's wrong with that? Why is one, such a great experience, and the other is just like, let's go through this process. Let's turn through this, lengthy process that we all cringe. So, I mean, it's applying what we know about customer experience to talent acquisition, because it's the right thing to do, to focus on the journey that the candidate has versus on the processes, which are always there in the back end to keep us. The processes are there to keep us in line and efficient and compliant and all those things, but we cannot afford to, especially today, to put a candidate through a process. We've got to put them through the journey and focus on their experience. And candidate experience is for everybody, not just for us in TA and HR, but hiring managers should be reading the books. Everybody should.
Yeah, and especially important in those industries where, as you've touched on, it's so hard to recruit, and the business we're in at Applichat is nurse recruitment, and we all know how difficult that industry is, and there's lots of other roles that are difficult to recruit in, but it sounds like, for all the reasons you stated, the candidate experience is maybe even more important when in those hard to recruit industries and roles.
Absolutely.
Okay, so as I say, you also touch on why the business impact of candidate experience is critical, and you've touched on it already, but is it something more you can add about that, and the some of the positive impacts that a positive candidate experience can have on the business?
Well, I mean, we're currently on our website at thetalentboard.org right now, we have what we call a resentment calculator. And even though it's more probably applicable to B2C companies than B2B, healthcare is one of those bizarre in-between worlds, right? Because obvious, but for elective kinds of procedures and surgeries, that could impact consumer choices at the end of the day. If I was a candidate and I wanted a job and it didn't work out and it was a crappy experience, I may choose to go to another healthcare organization for those kinds of procedures, not for emergency and that kind of stuff. So it's not exactly like going to buy a cell phone or not buying a cell phone because I had a crappy candidate experience, right? But we have a resentment calculator on our website where you can plug some numbers in, volume of hiring, how many employees you have, and based on what we call a resentment rate, the percentage of candidates who say they'll never do anything with the employer again, and see what kind of an annual impact, potential impact that can be. And we have companies using it all the time for putting together business cases internally. Even B2B companies will use it. Is it just to get a conversation started, right? It's not necessarily the same thing. We're also working on a referral calculator that's very similar about the impact on your referrals. Companies can, make 20, 30, 40+% of hires come from referrals, right? And if you start losing those referrals that would have potentially translated into hires, it's a lot of projections, but that could eat away at your employee revenue per day that you're generating in your company. So those things are, so the revenue is one part, but I think the universal here though is our referrals at the end of the day, right? Referrals are extremely important. Everybody depends on them. And especially in hard to fill roles like nursing, any place that you can get a potential referral is going to be critical. And that's what can be eaten away at or can grow and become a more positive result for a company if, again, they are the hardest thing in the world that we find every year in our data and our research and is sustaining a quality experience over time. You may make some improvements. This is great. And then a pandemic hits. And that has been it's been chaotic for us on many different levels, but especially in healthcare. It has been really difficult. And I know we see in our, candidate experience ratings, healthcare, and even we're still gathering data for 2022. We're about ready to wrap that up for the year and start analyzing.
Okay, wow.
But already what we're seeing though, it's even almost just as bad as it's been the first 2 years, meaning the candidate experience, the negative ratings are almost 200% higher for healthcare candidates than all other companies.
Oh boy. So we have more work to do than others.
Well, and it's also been tough, right? I mean, you think about healthcare, education, even some financial services, but more of those two it's been difficult. And then you combine that with the candidate market and the crazy town, all those things have translated in. It's been really hard. I mean, Adela and I both have done some work when she was doing some work with us, and even more recently in this past year with some healthcare organizations, some deeper dive work and looking at their processes. And even at the point of getting to the offer stage, if you get people that far, it has become even just as much of a moving target because you've got start dates that float. Because if I've got to verify certifications, right, for whether it's a nursing practitioner or whatever that role is, sometimes those things adds time that the candidates can say, I just got it, I'm gone. I'm going over here.
Nurses in particular don't want to be frustrated. They have too many offers happening. And,
exactly. And it's hard because some of that stuff's added the control, because these are the steps that have to be taken still, because no matter what I just was taught this the other day, and then I'll be quiet, let Adela talk. I was reminded this the other day that we talk a lot about streamlining, improving candidate experience, and that's all great. Companies still have to be compliant,
right?
Because the EEOC is right there, right? Anyway, what do you want to add to that, Adela?
Yeah, I think everything you mentioned is either completely accurate or just surprised me because I didn't know some of those numbers. That, for example, the negative sentiment is 200% higher in healthcare. That's definitely concerning. What I would say though is that the business impact. Think about the cost of an unfilled role in the organization. Think about all that, the overtime, the drain on the current employees, the time of the nursing supervisors or whoever's doing the interviews. They're working extra, right, to try to fill these roles. So that's why all this stuff is so important. I mean, all that is time as well, and there's so many hidden costs besides what we're currently measuring. And our analytics aren't strong enough to capture every part of cost, basically. So the business impact of canned experience is a really big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you mentioned overtime, and certainly in healthcare, there's a cost of using travel nurse or an agency nurse to backfill some of those roles. It's a really critical, something we really need, obviously, especially to get through the pandemic, but it's a big expense. But if we can help our clients to get more permanent hires, that'll help them reduce that expense as well. And you touched on this as well, the relationship, the communication, and the reputation, Glassdoor, and so on. And certainly using our example in healthcare, and Molly touched on it in the chat here as well, that nurses talk to each other. Their friends are nurses. So they're going to tell you if they had a terrible experience at a certain organization and there's 10 more down the street, then they're probably going to go there instead.
It happens. It happens all the time. We all, in our data every year, when we ask the candidates, do you share your positive and negative experiences with your inner circle? So close friends and colleagues, people that you talk to every single day. And the majority in each group, positive and negative, say they do. We share, we talk. We may not go post online. We may not go post and that review on Glassdoor, but we talk to our inner circle.
Right.
And that's
powerful.
It absolutely is. It may not just, I always use another example, which is, it may not dissuade all the nurses from wanting to apply, because maybe this is, again, that's the opportunity that I want to work there. I'll still do it. But it may start eating away at those people that were potentially qualified in a market that was already hard pre-COVID.
Right. We can't lose any ground at all. Yeah. Okay, well, let's move into those 3 phases that I wanted to focus on. The first being the application phase. Can you speak, first of all, generally to what are some best practices in how to manage as an employer, how to manage that application phase in order to ensure a positive candidate experience? Who'd like to start? Adela?
I'll let Adela go.
Absolutely. The first thing I think is the biggest thing is the first impression. So do your best when working with teams integrating your applicant tracking system into your websites that it's seamless, right? Use technology in your favor. It's a big deal. The second thing is time. There are a lot of really lengthy applications out there because, again, going back to what I said about processes for us. So I think that we've defaulted as employers to trying to get, look, what is every possible piece of information we might need to gather from someone we hire, and we've started asking that in the applications, and it's not great because it creates applications that are literally sometimes between 45 and 60 minutes to fill out. Mm-hmm. And so the best thing we can do for employers is to figure out what is the minimum amount of information that is required to determine whether or not this person is qualified. And that's all we need in the application. It should be 10, 15 minutes tops, if that.
Right.
That's all we need. And the rest can be gathered later. Build it into the process later when people are engaged and are super excited because you're about to give them a job. And then you can say, housekeeping item, I need a couple referrals from you, right? That's the time to ask for referrals, not if it's someone that we might not even hire. And those are my 2 biggest pieces of advice.
Yeah, Adela hit on the head the fact that the trend that we've seen in our data that employers have been reducing the time, including healthcare. Well, not as much on the healthcare side. That could be part of the problem too. The amount of time it takes to get in the door. The way I always say, get in the door and then let your other screening processes kick in, depending on where you're going to move people in your workflow, your pipeline, however you want to call it. But one great place to start, and I ask this every single time we do workshops or events or anything where we're talking to other practitioners and TA folks and recruiters, do you apply for your own jobs? Not when you got the job, literally, but when do you actually go through the exercise of seeing what it's like? Have you ever gone through that exercise? Have you ever realized that, wow, we're asking them to upload a resume, which I know we're going to get to, you may struggle to get from them, and or let them, if they have a LinkedIn profile, which a lot of nurses don't, to upload that. But then I'm asking them to still fill all the fields in, the redundancies, and I got to do a lot of cleanup. Maybe there's an assessment that may or may not be relevant to what I'm applying for at the end of the day, and all those different things. Go through that process. You don't have to do it more than once or twice a year, and especially after you've implemented a new ATS or a new system. What are you having them do? And say, wow, there's definitely things that we can collapse and streamline to that point. That's the only way to know how to do it. But go through and try to get your leadership team to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I had this great conversation the other day too. There's a lot of people that are in leadership, whether it's in HR and TA leadership or in the business leadership in general, they haven't applied for a job in a long time, probably. Right. Not like everybody else does on a regular basis, especially not the high volume people that they're hiring. Try to get them to go through the exercise too. I mean, it's quite eye-opening when you start thinking about it. And if you capture any feedback, which is another recommendation that I would make, of course, get candidate feedback as well about that step, and then say, wow, because you control as the employer, whatever systems and processes and the people that you have that are managing recruiting and hiring, you control the dials. Right. You always control the dials.
Right. Yeah. And putting yourselves in the shoes of someone, like, again, using our example, a nurse who's super busy and is getting how many phone calls a week for headhunting potentially, and then having to get stuck into that, the rigmarole, and they're easily frustrated and can easily drop off through the process. And I know one of the things we run into when we're working with our clients, we're bringing them applicants, so usually passive candidates we've got interested in working for our client. And often our clients will say, but we have no choice. They have to apply through our ATS. They have to fill out the application through our ATS. And of course, we know we're going to lose some of those applicants during that time. The clients who are able to be flexible, and it's challenging in a larger organization often, but the clients who are able to say, okay, we'll start the conversation, and then maybe we can help them apply through the ATS. They can find some more success with that. But I know those challenges that were created to help the process actually cause some hindrance. So any comments about that? And you touched on, how to get your leadership buy-in by getting them to apply. But is there anything else you can comment about that? How to get leadership to understand that maybe we need to shift the approach?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think number one, I think I always encourage every single talent acquisition professional out there to try to get out of, like we say in the book, recruiting is taking an order. Recruiting is part of our job, right? We're filling an order. That's absolutely what we do. But we've got to think about talent acquisition, which is always acquiring talent, whether it's passive, active, like building those relationships. And so don't be afraid to be consultative with hiring managers or leaders and inform them about these changes, because a lot of times they just simply don't know. And so when they're saying something like, no, we want them to apply first, and then the recruiter says, okay, it's because that's the way that they've always done that. And they don't understand how the world has changed in the past few years, how the market just continues to, it's different week to week sometimes. It's nuts. And so we have to bring that data to them and share with them, hey, things are really changing. This is what the pandemic did. This is how the job market changed as a result of that, especially in nursing. Here's what I recommend to you. I strongly believe that you should have a conversation with someone first, or even if they have a recruiter, right? If the hospital has a recruiter, have that person, just a general intro conversation first, to build the relationship. I think that they're going to be a lot more willing to apply after that point, that initial, like build that bridge first. If it's just one step and they haven't had a chance to evaluate you, they might drop out. They might not be as willing. And it's okay to have that conversation before they apply, because it's not a compliance issue at that point. They definitely have to apply at some point, but I would say, it's important to start with the relationship first.
Yeah, okay. No, I totally agree. And what is the minimum amount of information that you need at the door to make the determination of what happens next? That's right. Yeah. Right. And I think that is, it feels like that when we go back to the pre-internet days, before the first ATSs, before applying for jobs online, we took, the lengthy job application that we used to do in person and we put it online, and we never changed it.
Yeah, right.
Just the systems changed around it, but you control that, even with the vendors that you work with. Again, you have to remain in compliance, and you do. And as Adela said, you do have to have people. You still have to go through that. They have to still apply. But again, what is that minimum amount of information that you need for the roles that you're hiring for? Just at that point of application. That's the thing that you should evaluate. I would also recommend, speak along the same lines that Adela was talking about educating your team on a continuous basis. You know, maybe do monthly lunch and learns where you have somebody talk about the labor market, what's going on in your region, specifically in the labor market, and what are the just to keep your team and the hiring managers, invite them and keep them educated as to these are the realities, and if hopefully if you haven't done it yet, and you start eventually capturing candidate feedback data, start presenting that to them too. Like, listen, this is what the candidates have been telling us for the past quarter, what works and what doesn't work. Let's talk about it. Here's things, especially when you start getting in, because at that point, most of it for any companies of any hiring volume, any healthcare organizations, that's mostly automated. The application, right? Unless you are really nurturing and sourcing, again, nurses, which are hard to find. But wherever the human interaction occurs, you control that as well. And so, but yeah, I mean, definitely take the time to educate your teams.
Right. Yeah, education is critical. Like, information's powerful, but only if people are aware of it, right? And really, everyone's on the same page.
And again, thinking about what's in it for this applicant, this nurse. I mean, even not being I started out as a healthcare practitioner. I used to work on an ambulance. That was my first job. But even in my role now, if I get an inbound, LinkedIn message from another recruiter, and they're like, "Oh, my client, this opportunity," I'm like, like, I don't even pay attention to it. I'm not looking for a new job. I love my job, but I like to network with other talent acquisition people. But I feel like that's so old. Recruiters are in demand, and you're still working with this, mentality of my client. This great opportunity. I need more. I don't even want to pay attention.
Right.
So, what's in it for the candidate?
Okay. And so, speaking on the same topic of sort of outdated processes, what about the resumes? You touched on it. You mentioned it briefly, Kevin. Again, we have clients who are really stuck and feeling trapped because they have a process where we have to have a resume, or maybe a certain person will, requires a resume before they'll move an applicant forward in the process. We know, especially with, again, passive candidates that we're finding, they don't always have a resume ready. And we know we're not going to get a resume from many of them, right? So, and again, our clients that are open to being flexible and starting a conversation without a resume even are the ones that are having more success hiring. Tell me your thoughts about that.
Bury the resume.
Bury the resume. Okay.
Put it to rest and say goodbye. Well, I've been that advocate of that for a long time. Now, I know the next comment doesn't really apply to nursing, because you don't have a lot of nurses on LinkedIn. But something that is more, I've always been an advocate of having an online profile. And I think maybe at some point, blockchain technology, which is way above my pay grade, may at some point impact how we all have our own portable personal information for working. But until we get there, I just think that resumes they're not really verifiable documents that are initially out of the gate, right? You have to do your due diligence based on what they've put down and what they said they've done versus what they haven't done. But I think, again, go back to what's the minimum amount of information I need right now from this person to see if they're minimally qualified to get to that, whatever that next process and stage is. Then I can get more stuff from them. What are your certifications? And you were mentioning before we started, Adela, what their licensing number is, right?
Absolutely. Yes. I see both sides of it, right? From the HR side, I see, okay, if they're a large organization, years of experience, total years of relevant experience is tied to, like, we need to look and see how much we want to pay them, right? Like, it's tied to all sorts of things on the back end, which is probably why ultimately we want a resume. But when do we need it? We don't need it right away. And so what I would do is ask the hiring manager personally. What I would do is say, well, okay, can you tell me why we need this right now? Is there a reason why?
Right.
And if it's just like, well, I just need to look at it, it's I mean, then have the explanation. I mean, okay, so this person is, we double check, they're eligible to work right now, their license is active, they're at this facility. Let's have the conversation. If we decide mutually we want to move forward, then absolutely, I'll have that conversation with them. That's time to update their resume. But right now, let's just start with the conversation.
That's
so
awesome.
I think that's
That's
and
the right approach.
And because it's also the way we've always done it. It doesn't have to be the way we continue to do it. It's just the way that we've always done it. But especially in a highly competitive talent market like nursing, like technology professionals, Adela, what you're doing now too as well. I mean, you've got to figure out what the most effective workarounds on. And again, what's the minimum amount of information I need? Then at some point, if it's you got to get them in the ATS, you got to get them in the system, maybe have something like a resume, but we can't just keep hammering people into the round people into square holes.
And as you say, the resume there's no guarantee that the resume is accurate, right? So let's collect what information we can.
There's no guarantee my LinkedIn profile is accurate. In fact, there are a lot of professionals. I mean, I know how this works. A lot of professionals that are getting pinged all the time on LinkedIn by recruiters, they don't even keep their LinkedIn profiles up to date, right? On purpose, because they don't want to get pinged.
Mine's not.
No.
So I mean, I get all that, but I mean, you can't keep beating your head against the wall just because you did it that way for that long.
Right.
The way that I explain it is, so in technology, right, and you can apply this to medicine too. Think about all the changes that are happening every day. There's a new advancement in medicine, in technology. It's not static; it's constantly changing. That's exactly how this field is too. And that's why I'm here to tell you how it's changing. Because if like JD Edwards, it's an ERP system, I know, right? Like we're on version 9.2. So if someone comes in with 4.0, they're not qualified for the role because there have been so many advancements in that technology. And the same thing is happening in talent acquisition. We got to keep up with it, just like we keep up with every other, with medicine, with technology, with everything else.
And I think, I mean, I don't, and then it leads, and we don't have to talk about this too much, but there's been a lot of burnout in recruiting.
Absolutely.
In HR, a lot of folks that, and especially I would argue, across industries, but in industries like healthcare, that it just continued to get hammered by the public, by the pandemic, by so many different things that people are like, just like, unfortunately, like with education, there's people that are not staying in teaching, they're not staying in healthcare, they're not staying in recruiting and hiring because they're like, I've connected with lots of folks this year, and I do every year on LinkedIn, but a lot more. And there's been anecdotally a percentage of folks, a smaller percentage, that say, "Oh, I'm no longer in recruiting anymore. I'm all done with that. I'm all fried and burnt." And and I think, unfortunately, I would argue that some of that comes back from the disparity of perception gaps between what leadership thinks is happening and what their awareness of what they think TA is and what it really should be. And what the frontline practitioners, that's another conversation for another time, but there are folks that are fried too.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you've already given me 2 tips for sure that I know we can use when we're talking to our talent acquisition clients, the folks that work in talent acquisition, for making progress within the organization. So this is great. Let's move to the screening and interviewing stage. And again, I know there's often some blockages once the screening process starts. Maybe it's a resume, or maybe it's screening other applications, and blocks between getting them through the screening and interviewing stage, and challenges there. Can you talk about, again, best practices at that stage of the process?
Absolutely. First thing I would do right initially is do your best to set SLAs, service level agreements. Here's what I'm going to be responsible for, but here's what I'm going to need you to be responsible for, to the hiring manager, right? Whether it's feedback back in a certain period of time, 24 to 48 hours, whether it's whatever your process is, right? And this is a tip I've learned from Edwards Life Sciences, which I will do every day now, or every time I have a intake meeting with a hiring manager, is email them back, recap your message in an email and send it to them. So even if you don't even if they don't read it, you can still say, well, we talked about that, and here are my notes. Remember, I sent this to you, and here's the recap. So hold them to those SLAs, because most of the time, it's not the recruiter who is slow or is causing the delay. It's on the other side, and it's not out of negligence. It's because they're so busy. They're up to here in work that they can't break away. But that's why stuff doesn't get done. The easiest person to blame is the recruiter, is recruiting, right? And that's just what happens. And so just get ahead of it by setting those SLAs. This is what we're going to do. And if they don't do it, I mean, you can only move as fast as they can. And it's not to place the blame elsewhere. It's just to call out where the stoppage is and to unblock that.
Right. Okay, that's helpful.
I'll add to that is, in our data and research every year, the highest rated companies with candidate experience ratings in our data are the ones that at this stage are adhering to a very consistent and structured interview process. Meaning, so just, very big, generally speaking, consistent set of relevant questions for candidates across job types that everybody is delivering as close to the same way as possible each time, which increases perception of fairness for the candidates, but I would argue also makes for better selection process too, when everybody's being reviewed in a very, very, very similar way, as opposed to rogue questions that have no relevancy at all about the job, and which can happen in a very unstructured process. So, but the companies that have the highest ratings in our research are all delivering not everything right all the time, but most of the things that we recommend more of the time in a consistent fashion, and that structured interview process.
Okay, great. So that's real good. Again, evidence-based, like you say, your book it comes with evidence-based advice, and it's working. You're seeing that it's working.
It's not about what you think you know. What do you know? And make sure you have the data to know what is happening. And we find this every year. What the companies that have a general understanding of where they think how they're delivering recruiting and hiring, they're not usually the data that they capture through our program is not that surprising. They're like, yeah, that aligns with what we already know. The thing that freaks me out is when we have people that are in complete denial that doesn't happen that often, but they're like, oh, those are our candidates. And we're like, yeah, they are. Those are your candidate responses. But most of the time there's already a general awareness, but get the data in front of you to know, okay, these are the things that we need to do. Adela, the SLAs that she's talking about all relates to the bigger picture that we find every year about expectation setting, not just for the candidates, but for everybody internally. What is going to happen next? And let's make sure that we are consistent as possible and that we're delivering on that at the end of the day.
Right. Every
single year, Patrick, we're asked at Talent Board, what's new and fresh about candidate experience, Kevin? And I say, absolutely nothing. Nothing. It's the same things every single year. Communication, feedback. The world changes around us. The market changes. The talent market changes. Recruiting is like a yo-yo, right? When it's a downturn, it's down. When it's an upturn, it's up. But it's the same: communication, feedback, expectation setting, transparency. Every single year, those things. You control the dials.
Yeah, and even though we don't, yet have official standards in talent acquisition to follow, we're borrowing these things. So, like when we talked about the candidate experience, that comes from customer experience mostly.
Sure.
When we're talking about this, think about project management. I mean, you have to get buy-in from all your, sign off from all your stakeholders before a process is kind of put in place. So it's that same concept. And so that's a great training opportunity for anyone, is to find maybe like a PM, like a project management class for non-PMs, right? And don't go to PMBOK, but just like a couple hour training thing, just to kind of get some of these concepts in, and the way that communication can happen professionally.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great. And you referred to this earlier, and some of the challenges can be at various stages of the process. Certainly our talent acquisition people tell us that it is sometimes there's particular hiring managers that it takes a while for them to get to an applicant in the process. And you touched on it again throughout the conversation, but a lot of it is about data. It's about communication. And I did hear a good tip recently where talent acquisition head was able to convince their hiring managers in a hospital that we need to try booking interviews into your calendar. So yes, where the hiring managers typically saw the resume and made a decision about whether they would interview, but that took sometimes days to get to that process. Where if talent acquisition is booking in their calendar, the interview is going to happen. Yes, there's going to be some that you're not interested in, but that would happen anyway. And they were finding that that is a much more efficient process, and they're really getting more hires as a result. So
that's awesome.
I found, yeah.
And even if the company says, I mean, cybersecurity or whoever says, no, we don't want that, how about a Calendly link, right? I mean, like it's easy to access. I mean, just have a hiring manager set up an account, give the link to the recruiter, and the recruiter can share it with candidates, like book here. This is our hiring manager. This is who you'll talk with next. Here's what you can expect. I mean, that could be pretty seamless.
And if you have a platform or even a standalone solution that helps you to automate interview scheduling, meaning, I mean, if you have access to those calendars, if you're sharing calendars with one another, and I think to your point, Patrick, what you're saying is I can then schedule that time on you. But and there's, I mean, instead of the back and forth constantly of can you do this, and even like Adela just said, Calendly and HubSpot, which we use it's a marketing platform, but they have the calendar functionality to share what my availability is and get it on my calendar. I mean, that just saves so much back and forth time. Just automate that stuff. Try to automate as much of that as you can and get it on their calendars and focus on the hiring. Focus on the hiring.
Right. Well, and Liliana in the chat goes even a step further. She says if resumes are irrelevant and need to be validated, once the candidate's credentials, skills, and experience are validated, why do we interview at all? What's the goal of an interview? What are your thoughts about that? And, you know, especially in a real high demand role where we're really short of applicants.
Adela, do you want to? I have an answer, but I'll go ahead. You go first.
Yeah, that's a zinger of a question. I like it. Well, the first things that come to mind are, number one, I mean, there's always the alignment to the company, whatever the company is, their competencies, their values, their culture. I mean, all those things are really important. So that's something. I mean, just to make sure someone is aligned with the organization, because you want to hire that long-term talent that will build the best team possible, the most diverse team possible, all those things. The second thing is, I mean, for some sort of, maybe, I don't know, I'm just throwing this out there, but maybe there's something specialized, maybe there's something specific on the job that needs to be tested in some way, shape, or form. So finding the most qualified person with a particular tool. Those are my thoughts on the interview. Kevin, what else do you have?
No, I agree with you. What I struggle with is the term culture fit.
Right. I say culture add.
You didn't say that. You didn't say that.
Alignment or add.
You didn't say that at all.
No, I agree with you 100%.
But you know, but we're not, I mean, so this is, it's all contextual. I mean, if there's a way to, if interviewing was more about scenario, playing out scenarios with individuals to kind of get an understanding, but you're not hiring for likability necessarily, right? You're not hiring if like, and sometimes I wonder if that's the case of what happens, right? I like this person to write down.
When you have an unstructured interview, it can happen, which is why structured interviews are so good.
Yeah, I know. And I agree with that. I think that's important still, but I don't, I mean, but in the context of so nursing is different, right? Because if I have to work with other people, there has to be a context of whether I know if I feel comfortable this person can work well with patients, right? Because you have, you know, that's your customer at the end of the day in healthcare, right? One of the main ones are the patients. And as far as what I know, I think in healthcare, I mean, there's a lot of customer evaluations that go on, right? Patient evaluations of the staff, of the nursing, of the doctors. So you have to ensure that, but that's a tough one. Again, it's so hard because we just can't generalize across job types. There's just very unique contexts for each of those.
Sure.
So anyway.
Okay. It was a zinger of a question, like Adela said. Thanks, Liliana, for that. Great. Okay, so we get through application, the screening, the interviewing stage, we're at the offer stage. And again, there's often delays. Things get bogged down. We think we're in a hurry, and suddenly the hurry seemed to go out the window and things take forever, for example. Let's talk about the offer stage. What do you recommend people think about in order to really make sure candidates have a good experience through this process?
There are a few things. I think the first thing is see if there's any potential influence to get approvals started early on, rather than wait till, okay, this is our finalist candidate, we want to extend an offer, and then now there's a really lengthy approval process that happens where sometimes it even gets stuck in email, right? Because they're not automated approvals. I see that a lot. Usually it's administrative stuff that causes delays like that. Another thing is if there is any sort of compensation analysis, can that be done on the front end, right? When the search starts or when we first start seeing candidates, rather than waiting till, okay, this is our finalist, we've identified this person, now let's do this analysis that's going to take us a few days. And so what can be done in preparation for a search rather than at the end when we find the individual? I think other than that, the biggest thing for me is to make sure, again, this is an experience of someone, and we want them to be excited that they're joining the organization. We want to be, like a recruiter should be an advocate for both sides, both the hiring managers, but then also for the candidate. And so be their coach, their cheerleader throughout it. I try to get out of, like the really, kind of formal sort of, like speak. As you can see, I'm not super professional, like, so when I talk with candidates, I like to be like, I'm so excited, it's like it should feel like a hug or a handshake, right? Like you've brought them through this journey, and now we're at this end stage. Like, I am so thrilled to be, extending this offer to you. Here's what I want you to focus on. Here's what I want you to remember, right? We talked about counter offers. We talked about why you're looking and why this is a good role. So all that recap stuff, I mean, just whatever you can do to prep on both sides is going to get you over the finish line.
I like that. Yeah. So not losing the momentum, and also making sure that you're keeping the theme of your relationship going right to the wire, right?
Absolutely. And after, if they say no, you know what? Stay in touch, because 6 months down the road, things might change.
They might be back.
The term that's being thrown around a lot more is what pre-boarding. So what happens before day one. And I can tell you everything that Adela just said, that the more engagement and nurturing that a new hire that's accepted, even if verbally and especially in writing, and even if they end up saying, because we're having a lot more candidates in the final hour saying I'm out, right? But if keep them nurtured as much as you can, and not just about the pesky paperwork that's got to get taken care of. Are there people that can be introduced to, even if it's done virtually, that are on their team, who their boss is going to be, if they haven't already met that person, the hiring manager themselves? I mean, all of those things that can happen, especially if there has to be checks, background checks have to be done, certification checks have to be done. Keeping them engaged before they start it really, I would argue, helps with not only a positive experience, but helps with retention out of the gate.
For sure.
And one big thing I think is like, even though technically our role stops when they sign the offer letter, don't let it. I mean, like, stick with it until that person, like, if whatever the end stage is, if you're a corporate recruiter, when their team's light is green, right, or whatever it is. I mean, it's you're the first person that they made contact with, and so just stick around and be their resource, because they're gonna have questions and they're probably gonna come to you. So just see it through, right? It's like when you play golf, right? Like, follow through with the swing. Don't just stop when you make contact with the ball. Like, you gotta follow through.
Exactly.
Wonderful. That's great. Well, we're doing a really good job of filling the hour here. And if other people do have any questions, now is the time to pop them in. We'll see if we can get to them. You've also, Adela and Kevin, you've done a great job of using your broad experience and touched on healthcare really specifically a number of times. So that's helpful. But let me just open it up to see if you have any other specific comments about healthcare recruitment candidate experience that could be helpful for our audience.
I think for me, I want to kind of circle back to what I said at the very beginning. I think a lot of talent acquisition people out there, if you're starting to feel, like Kevin said, a little bit drained, a little bit like, gosh, this is so hard. I personally derive so much joy from focusing on candidate experience. I mean, every time I have a call, I can tell you, like a screening call, it used to be like, Another phone call. And now I think about what can I do for this person today?
Mm-hmm.
And it just changes everything. And it's just such a joy. And I think also don't forget that new jobs, even though for us, I mean, we're hiring people, especially think about high volume hiring. I mean, maybe you're hiring 100 people a day, but those are huge life-changing decisions for people, and it's scary. And they have to extricate themselves from like bank accounts or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of stuff you don't think about, like insurance,
Sure.
kids on prescriptions, and just think about that. Like be empathetic and just remember it's a big decision, and that way you'll be able to better support them too, and they're going to thank you for it. And a lot of times those relationships, you're going to win the hire over another offer with more money.
That's great.
Not every time, but a lot of times.
And everything that she just said goes a long way with all of us as humans. I mean, even if we hear it, we see it all the time in the comments that we get in the candidate experience data. Like, I'm bummed I didn't get the job, but Sally, the recruiter, was great with me and answered all my questions and was really caring. And I mean, those are the kind of, that goes a long way with candidates, and they're willing to, for the most part, that empathy it can spread, and their willingness to try again and to recommend to a friend and or to come in the store or
reputation piece again, right?
I mean, that goes back to the business again, right?
Exactly.
And it's like paying it forward, right? A smile goes a long way. All those things that but it does, though. It really, really, really does. Especially in a place where, with the exception of maybe serial appliers, again, everybody who's an employer knows what I'm talking about. People that are never going to be qualified for jobs and they're applying for them all the time. That's a small percentage. Most of us we feel like we got something that maybe this is the job for me. And at the point of application, most of those people, right, don't go any farther than that at the end of the day. And it's hard. It's an uphill battle for employers of any hiring volume scale, because most of the people are unqualified. Right. And one thing I could leave you with, one more last tip would be, that I don't think we touched on this, is if they are truly unqualified. I mean, every candidate wants to believe they are qualified, but we know that that's not the case, right? It's just not sure. Only so many people are going to go beyond that. If they're not qualified, tell them. Too soon is too soon, meaning like not a minute after they applied, but within a week, 1 to 2 weeks max. Disposition in that time frame if they are not qualified to go further. They are not going to magically change in a few weeks necessarily if you have a recruiting culture that says we're going to wait until we fill the role, then we'll disposition everybody. But that could be weeks or months later.
Yeah, for years.
The expectation.
Or years later. Just tell them.
I got one the other day.
Oh no!
Oh, did you really? Seriously?
Years? Oh boy! Yeah, we see those pop up.
Listen, we did a real quick our own kind of review of the 100 best places to work for, according to Fortune magazine, a great place to work, and that's a great work that they do, all about employee experience. Not just disparaging that at all, but our hypothesis was, well, these companies should have a good candidate experience too. And some have participated in our research, and we know that to be a fact. And the reality is that the disposition, I mean, it was just not that great. It's kind of a mixed bag overall, especially at the point of application, which again is very tough for employers. I get that. But anyway, let them know. Tell the unqualified candidates, thank you, but we're not going to pursue you right now. Best of luck. And go. Focus on the people that may get screened.
Communication. That's great. We'll come back to what you started with at the beginning. Great. Well, I won't, we're getting to the top of the hour, so I don't want to miss the chance to let people know how to get your book, because I know a lot of people expressed a lot of interest in reading your book, and let's share with them the best way to find the book.
Absolutely. Well, first, easiest place is on Amazon. You can also go to Kogan Page, who's our publisher's site, and find it.
I put
the talent board.
We have a page dedicated to it at the talent board. I don't know if I can actually share a link in this particular show but it's on our talent board site too as well. But with Adela, the easiest place is go to Amazon and search for the book title or one of us, and it'll come up.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I put the link in the chat as well so people can
Oh,
find
great.
it.
Okay.
And I'm
Thank
also
you.
putting in the link again for my online business card so that people can connect with us at Applichat and learn more about how we can help with nurse recruitment, and also sign up for our webinars, join our Facebook group, and so on. So it's on the screen there as well. So feel free to do that. I'd be happy to connect with anyone who's interested. And I did share Kevin and Adela's LinkedIn information at the beginning. You can find them on LinkedIn as
Great.
well.
Thank you.
Kevin and Adela, thanks so much. This has been really interesting. You packed a lot of information into an hour, and I know there's a lot more in the book for people. So we really appreciate you sharing the book, and congratulations on that, and good luck with it.
Thank you. And give us your feedback about it too, please. Love to hear. Yeah.
Awesome. Good. Well, thanks for sharing your time today and your expertise, and welcome everyone to come back and join us for future webinars as well.
Thanks,
Thank you for the
Patrick.
invite.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.